Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Finding Equilibrium podcast. And today I'm here with one of my favorite people, probably, and somebody I met a couple of years ago and has had a big impact on my own wellness journey, and now my friend and my colleague. So please welcome Benjamin Haynes. Hello, Benjamin.
Hello, Lawrence. That's quite the intro. Thank you.
How are you? Like, nice shirt. I like that.
Oh, you like this one? Yeah. Little hummingbirds on the side. Very good. Very good. Thanks.
Good.
Interesting times.
Very interesting times. So the benefit of the audience, why don't you introduce yourself and just say a little about who you are, where you are and what you do.
So my name is Benjamin, as you've said, Haynes, and I work for myself in a business called The Medicine Man. And there's kind of two arms to that sort of business. On the one side, it's all individual kind of one-on-one health, kind of coaching and lifestyle guidance and herbal medicine and sort of body therapy treatments. And on the other side of that, there is corporate consulting, more on a strategy perspective. And so, yeah, it keeps me very busy. On the third kind of piece is working in a not-for-profit that I'm a partner in. And so between the three of those things, I keep myself quite busy.
So many different hats. And how did you get to do what you do? Because a lot of people are very interested in health and wellness. And I guess what we've seen are one of the real benefits of the COVID period, and there's always pros and cons, but one of the real benefits is that there's been a lot more awareness of health and well-being and the importance of it in living a good life. But how did you get into doing what you do?
I think it's been a journey like everybody has had. And so, my career sort of began back in the 90s, really, working in television and advertising. But during that entire time of working in TV and things, always having this feeling and a calling to be helping people, to be doing something more that felt like it was doing more than kind of selling people things that they didn't need, which, to be fair, is a pretty negative slant on what I was doing, because I was lucky to be able to work on products and things that I generally believed in.
So what were you doing? I mean, you were working in was it advertising, television, media?
So television to begin with. I was working brand strategy for MTV over in London for a number of years, and so that was really exciting through my 20s. Getting to know different cultures and different people, and I think as part of that was just understanding that everybody's really different and equally valid, and different cultures and different ways of eating. And so those sorts of things were very sort of present for me while I was starting to think about what else I would be interested in doing outside of that type of work. And so I came back to Australia with some health stuff to do with my family, and decided to stay here in Australia. And as part of that, I made that sort of commitment to begin, looking into other ways of supporting myself and living and moving through the world. And so I started to study Ayurvedic medicine at that time, and did my yoga teacher training. And so for many years I was teaching yoga, and still off and on do from time to time with individuals, and up until fairly recently doing classes, and then eventually finished my qualifications in Ayurveda and opened the practice in Potts Point. And so that's I guess, like most people though, I think, or what I think is maybe an important fact in those sorts of journeys is, for me, it was a case of not putting all my eggs in one basket. So I still do consulting work. This was something that I started on the side, and over time I've been able to transition further and further into doing mostly the work that I want to.
That's really cool. So you mentioned Ayurveda, and I know what that is, and I'm very familiar with it. But for the benefit of the people who don't or haven't heard of Ayurveda, what is it, and how does it really benefit people in comparison to other modalities?
So it's the traditional system of medicine that came out of India, and it came out of the same sort of bodies of text and knowledge that gave us yoga. I think increasingly people are becoming more and more aware of Ayurveda through their familiarity with yoga, because it's considered the medical sister science of yoga. So where yoga is sort of designed to lead towards spiritual emancipation, Ayurveda is designed to make sure that, I guess, the body isn't a hindrance in that process, and that we can live, healthy, happy lives for as long as we're here.
So it makes perfect sense. One thing that attracted me to Ayurveda, and you've been a big part of that journey, but before I met you, my experience of Ayurveda was in India. And when I met you, I guess I was initially surprised that you weren't Indian. And you've really, in the time we've worked together, you've really given me a completely different perspective on Ayurveda, because one of the trends that we see certainly in mainstream medicine is that everything's becoming more and more holistic. You hear that word a lot, but Ayurveda has been a holistic practice for thousands of years, and it feels that almost modern medicine is catching up with where Ayurveda has been for such a long time, and the two paths are coming together. How does Ayurveda work, and where could someone start with Ayurveda? Because it is a very integrative lifestyle choice, and this is why I like it. It's not like a diet or a quick fix. It's something which is very fundamental to the way you live your life. But I'd love you to just share some of the elements of Ayurveda. What shifted for me when I first came across it was all about India, and it was all about herbs, and that's kind of as far as it went. And then it became about massage and treatments, but they were very isolated initiatives. What you've done is really helped to join up all the dots and connect yoga with other forms of lifestyle choice. So I'd love you just to outline how you see Ayurveda and how it can help somebody who's listening to this right now.
I think the jewel in the crown of the Ayurvedic approach and philosophy in general is that it's individualized medicine effectively. So there's never one size fits all, that everybody sort of has the same diet and lifestyle and, daily routine type habits, because everybody's quite different. And I think we all know that ourselves, that, you've got some people that can eat whatever they want and never gain any weight, and somebody looks sideways at a piece of cake and puts on a kilo. So we know fundamentally that we're all quite different. Some people are very grounded and very calm, and other people are very kind of frantic and frenetic in their energy. And Ayurveda explains all of that, which is why I liked it as well, because it is holistic and it is individual. So it looks at us as unique beings that have got a certain ratio of earth, air, fire, water, and space. So it's a 5-element theory-based modality, and that combination of earth, air, fire, water, and space in different ratios constitutes what we call prakriti, which is your constitution that you're born with. And that constitution, that ratio, gives you certain strengths and certain weaknesses. It gives you certain tendencies towards imbalance or illness. And so by knowing what your constitution is, it allows you to make choices that can either bring that back into balance if it's moved out of balance, or to help you maintain balance so that you don't, fall into those, potential ailments that you're, possibly inclined towards.
Okay.
I think it's important to note too, though, because a lot of people that might be familiar with, the concept of doshas or, constitutional medicine, that even though there's a set ratio of earth, air, fire, water, and space when you're born, you're not actually looking to try and get them all even. So the goal in Ayurveda is not to have equal amounts of each of the elements in your constitution. It's to maintain whatever ratio you were born with.
Interesting. Okay, so that sounds. So let's just unpack that a little bit. So to bring it to life for our listeners, our viewers, give me an example of a constitution, if you like, or a dosha. So how would you describe it? Like, how would I, for example, know who I am and what the right balance is for me?
So if I could maybe take it back just one step before that. So the constitutions and, the elements, earth, air, fire, water, and space, are actually just convenient names for collections of qualities. So the Vedic texts talk about 20 qualities that make up the entire manifest universe. And so they're actually 10 pairs of opposites. So you've got heavy and light, dry and oily. So you've got these 10 different pairs of opposites that allow you to categorize anything in the world, anything in the universe. And so when we talk about earth, we're actually just talking around a collection of qualities. Out of those 20, we're talking around just a subset of those that constitute what we call earth. So it's heavy and it's slow and it's, cool, for example. When we talk about fire, we're talking about another subset of those same 20 qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Further, so once we've got that concept in our minds, then the next thing is to look at what we call the constitutions. And so people that might be familiar with Ayurvedic medicine have heard the terminologies of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are again just convenient names that actually describe combinations of the elements, which are in turn just convenient names for combinations of qualities. So a Pitta person, for example, is fire and water. And so their constitution is made up of the qualities that make up fire and water, and that gives them certain tendencies and physical manifestations. And so you see oily skin with Pitta people, for example, because oily is one of the qualities of Pitta. Whereas Vata tends towards dry skin because dryness is one of the qualities that are associated with the air element or the space element that makes up Vata constitution. And so it's actually very simple, but it can seem overwhelming in the first instance, or perhaps because it's so different to what we're familiar with in the West.
Yes.
But I think, as you were saying, not being Indian sometimes can help, because you can act as that bridge between a body of knowledge that's very foreign and very different, and put in terminology that that we can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, what connected me right at the start was it makes so much sense, as you describe, and there's a lot of information there, but it makes so much sense. If we understand our own body and our own self, then we can find an environment, and it includes everything. It includes the food, it includes the movement, all the things that we talk about and perhaps break down too much in the West. It gives you that whole system. And so looking at a person, let's pick one of those types that you mentioned, a Vata type, for example, and you say that that person has a tendency to have dry skin. So would that be a symptom of them being out of balance if they've got dry skin? Is that the way that would show up? Is that what you mean?
It definitely will show up, or it definitely can show up as one of the symptoms of imbalance of Vata. But even when they're in a fairly balanced state, they're more inclined towards having a dry skin naturally than they are towards an oily skin. If it becomes too imbalanced, then they're going to start seeing that they've got dandruff or that their skin's flaking. And so that tendency towards dryness becomes exaggerated. So it's kind of always there to a certain degree. And so then we look at remedial measures, with the diet, for example, to increase the amount of unctuousness or oiliness that's in their diet. And that can be through, avocados and natural sort of ghee and natural sources of oil.
Wonderful. So when someone goes to see you, like just bring to life a typical consultation. When someone goes to see you, what would you do? How would you assess them to understand what's wrong or why they're experiencing symptoms that they're experiencing?
So the first thing in a consultation is generally just dialogue like this to ask people what it is that they're seeking. Some people are just looking for a better understanding of how they can eat, for various health goals that they might have, whether it's weight loss or more energy, or just to understand actually what's going to be good for them to improve their digestion. So we start generally just by understanding what it is that people are looking for, because obviously it's important to be focused on whatever people's health goals are. But we also need to take a look at their medical history so that we get a sense of the types of imbalances that they've been prone to in the past. And usually those things start as fairly small things that over time become more and more exaggerated versions of those small things, because those fundamental imbalances may not have been addressed, whether that's just through not knowing or through other types of medicine that don't kind of treat in the same way. So we can see patterns that start to emerge, and that's really helpful. I also get clients to talk to me about their current food habits. And so it's very interesting to see just what's on rotation. So many of us are creatures of habit. So there's certain things that we have for breakfast, and that's just how we eat. And so understanding those things are really important, along with other kind of just day-to-day things. So what time do people wake up? What time do they generally go to bed? What time do they eat their foods? Is it all over the shop, or are they fairly, consistent with the times?
Mm.
Because in Ayurveda, one of the most, powerful ways to bring balance back to a person is through what we call dincharya, which is daily routines. And that's, basically the concept that little by little things become big. And so what the things that you're doing every single day are the things that add up. So even if that's, if you're having, one coffee a day, coffee's not bad, but we know that it's heating, and we know that it's stimulating, we know that it's drying. So for a pitta person and a vata person, that can be challenging. So a pitta person that's already very hot, and maybe doing a stressful job or working in a hot kitchen as a chef or something, that's drinking a lot of coffee, increasing the heat every single day. And so even though it's only one a day, let's say, that comes to 30 a month, for example. Or if people are having 2 coffees a day, which still isn't an excessive amount, but it comes to it adds up. It becomes a lot over time. And so understanding how people are living is the key to making those little tweaks that make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking really about the micro habits, and we talk a lot about micro habits, are those tiny things. And I guess what you're saying is that those micro habits could have a negative cumulative impact over time. Even though it may be a simple thing like a coffee, and we think we can get away with a coffee a day, but some people can't if their environment and their whole constitution isn't geared towards that. So literally switching that one micro habit could really have a massive impact over a longer period of time.
Absolutely. And then the other thing, and just to be clear, coffee's not bad. I'm not suggesting that it's bad. Coffee's fine. It depends on who it is and how often they're doing it, and all those sorts of things, right? So that's really important as well. And that's one of the things that I also really love about Ayurveda, that nothing's good and nothing's bad.
Yeah,
there's some exceptions to that, but generally speaking, it's not good and bad. It's just, is it suitable or not?
Well, it's more exactly, and it's more something that's good for me, maybe not so good for you, because we're different biological bodies. So and that makes so much intuitive sense around that whole bio-individuality approach.
Yeah. And I think then there's some other things that exist within the Ayurvedic framework. So there's the idea of food combining, that certain foods are incompatible. We call it Varudeha in Ayurveda. They're incompatible combinations. And so there's, more Western scientific versions of that around, the types of digestive enzymes that are required to break those things down and the impact that they have when they come together. There's also how long it takes certain things to break down in the stomach versus other things. And so if something that breaks down very fast is eaten at the same time as something that doesn't, then you've got this fermentation process that's happening in the gut that leads to, toxins and heat that needs to come out somewhere. And so often that might be skin rashes or, loose bowels or headaches or nosebleeds. And so, there's a number of different levers that we can play with in Ayurveda, which I really enjoy.
Yes.
But it's also a bit of a different approach. So, smoothies, for example, which are really popular. And I have a lot of clients coming in, having a smoothie for breakfast and feeling like they're, doing a really good thing for their health. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, having that first thing in the morning is like putting a wet, heavy blanket on a small flame in your tummy that puts it out, So even though it might be healthy, it's more about what you digest that matters, even more than what you're eating, because even the healthiest, best food going in, if it doesn't get digested effectively in the body, becomes toxic anyway. And so we really need to understand the digestive process a little bit better in order to, just avoid some of those common mistakes and small things that, can lead to problems down the track.
Definitely. You touch on the whole piece around digestive health, and I know this is very fundamental, and there's been a lot of research still emerging around the importance of the gut and the microbiome to health. And again, this has been a core part of the Ayurvedic philosophy for a long time. What's your take on digestive health and microbiome and probiotics and some of the things that we see as becoming common practice? A lot of people are, drinking fermented drinks and eating fermented foods. That's going to be a similar approach? Like some people will do better with those kinds of products rather than one size fits all.
Absolutely. So a lot of so absolutely, those things can be really helpful. And people that are doing those things, will know for themselves whether it feels like it's, you know, it's increasing the amount of heartburn that they've got, or that their gut's feeling a lot better. Some things, you know, for small periods of time work really well, but, you know, too much over too long a period becomes problematic. So again, it all comes down to that individual constitution piece. But fundamentally, digestion in Ayurveda is at the core of good health. And so it's the most important thing. And you know, as part of that, there's, you know, the act of eating is actually considered quite sacred in Ayurveda, which is such a large leap from, you know, the way that we are here in the West, you know, stuffing something down on a lunch break before we have to get back into the next meeting. And, you know, and there's a certain reality to, you know, living here in the West and the pressures and time pressures that we're under. But I think it does underscore the potential and, you know, the importance of at least trying to structure our days in such a way that we actually prioritize taking time out to sit down and have something to eat. The Ayurvedic community and texts talk about Agni, the god of Agni, the god of fire that lives inside the stomach. So they view it, they say there's a thumb-sized god that lives inside your digestive system, inside your stomach, and that each time we eat something, it's an offering to Agni.
I like that.
And so, yeah, it's nice. The idea of putting terrible things in, you know, feels disrespectful, and so, or, you know, rushing and not actually, you know, chewing and appreciating the flavors of food.
Yes.
Yeah, these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think COVID is giving us the opportunity to have a bit of a break and go back to some of those basics and you know, celebrate what we put in our body. Just picking up on the topic around routines, and we've talked a lot about the food, and just moving on from talking about some, because there are some other things, you know, which I practice, and I know things like the tongue scraping and some of those very simple habits, but they do have quite a big impact. So I'd love you just to expand on why tongue scraping is a recommended routine within the Ayurvedic approach.
Well, first of all, that it's the easiest detox in the world. It's the easiest, fastest way to detoxify your body every day. So first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up, you know, ideally within 3 minutes of waking, you go straight to the bathroom, you spit out whatever's, you know, saliva is accumulated in your mouth in the morning. So you spit that out, then you brush your teeth straight away to remove any toxins and bacteria from the gum line, rinse out your mouth, and then scrape your tongue. And tongue scraping is designed to remove the toxins that have been deposited there overnight. So while we're sleeping, there's a number of, you know, bodily processes happening. Some of those processes are detoxification, and some of those toxins, and in fact, some of the, you know, fairly intense toxins get deposited on the tongue first thing in the morning, and we know that through morning breath and these sorts of things. By removing that before you eat or drink something, you take it out of the body. The problem is that if you don't scrape your tongue, then you go to the kitchen, you have a glass of water, you have something to eat, all those toxins go straight back in. So the body's spent all that time removing toxins, then we put it straight back in.
So simple. So a lot of people would drink a glass of water with lemon, like the first thing. But really, what you're saying is scrape your tongue first and then drink the water, because otherwise you're just pushing those toxins into your body. So a simple thing with a big impact. Cool, thank you for that. Let's talk about oils, because one of the great benefits, and I'm a great beneficiary of the whole treatment side of things. And I remember when I was in India, this was my very first experience of an Ayurveda practitioner, and I went with migraines. And the first bit was very similar, like he asked to what the problem was. But what was dramatically different was treatment, because he diagnosed, or he recommended daily massage every day, which was amazing. And the first time I've had experienced those treatments, plus a whole range of different herbs and different things. And by the end of that, and I was very lucky, I was in Kerala and I was there for 5 days. And when I left there, I felt 18. To be honest, like when I got there, I felt 118. And when I left, I'd rejuvenated significantly. And then I'm very lucky to have you in close proximity, because this has now become a daily practice and being able to experience those treatments on a more regular basis. But the whole concept about body oiling, because again, that's something that's quite different for us in the West. And I'd love you just to expand on why oiling the body is important as a healthy habit, and what that really can do for us as a routine that we can integrate into our lives.
So oiling is very important in Ayurveda, I guess, for a couple of reasons. Where to begin? So number one, we use it as a vehicle. We call it anupan in Ayurveda, which is vehicle. So we can use that to deliver medicine to the body. So generally speaking, when you're doing your daily self kind of massage, you're using medicated oils, which are, just herbs that have been infused into oil. And because the skin is semi-permeable, it means that, it can transport from the inside out or the outside in. And so, when we're using the skin from the inside out, we induce sweating in a person so that the toxins come out through the skin pores. But likewise, we can also put medicine into the body through those same skin pores. And so, medicated oils, plays that role in many instances. But it also has the effect of nourishing and calming the nervous system. And so that is, very important, particularly with the Vata constitution person whose nervous system is very active. Having warm oils massaged into the body has the effect of, like a big warm hug from, your favorite grandmother or something. So it calms the nervous system down. It also creates a coating on the skin that allows you to be more, protects us against the external world. And so, in many ways, it increases the strength of the skin barrier to foreign, invaders or foreign materials and things that are on the outside. So there's a number of reasons that it's beneficial.
So just talking about foreign bodies, so in an age where we have a virus in our midst, so that's something we can all do to really just give us a sense of protection and keep the virus out.
Certainly. And I mean, that would also include the orifices of the body. And so, we don't just apply oil to the arms and the legs and the torso in Ayurveda. We also apply it, in the nostrils, which is very helpful for, protecting that area, to seal the membrane in the nose. Again, such things you can do the ears and things as well. It's also, it's really helpful when you go flying, for example, just to oil, those orifices.
How does it work in terms of oiling your nose?
So we call it nasya therapy in Ayurveda. And so you get a little bottle of oil, medicated oils. You heat it up because you always, warm the oils in Ayurveda to help them penetrate more deeply into the tissues. And then it comes with a little dropper bottle, 3 drops up each nostril. You've got to sniff it up. So you've got to pull it strongly up by sniffing strongly into your sinuses. Massage around here, little face massage. And that's one of the daily routines in Ayurveda, Dincharya, daily routine.
That's so cool. Okay, so moving on, I'm conscious there's a lot of information here, and if we're talking about things that people can do, and everyone's going to start where they are, so what would you recommend, like the very first step that someone could take? Would it be finding out what their personal constitution is? Is that a good first step, and then working from there?
Yeah. I think, it's always a really great first step is to understand the individual constitution, because it's the basis, and that it allows the treatments to be not just symptomatic. So if you don't know your constitution and you have something that's wrong, then you can treat the symptoms of that, right? So you say, I'm getting headaches, and we treat, headaches as a symptom, or, I've got sinus issues, and we say, okay, well, we can fix sinus issues. But once you know the constitution, then you start to understand, okay, what are the habits? What are the daily kind of habits? What are the choices that I can make that are going to be helping me to create long-term good health and avoid those other things? So I think that's a great place to start. And that you can go about that in a couple of ways. You can go to various websites and look up your constitution. The key to those, just for anyone that's listening, is to answer the questions that you see with a view that spans over your whole life. So if it's asking you, whether you're, easy to put on weight or, naturally find it hard to gain weight, you have to think over the course of your whole life what you've been like, rather than just in the last year or two. Same with your bowel habits. Are you prone towards constipation or skew towards having loose bowels over the course of your whole life, not just now? And so that allows you to work out what your constitution is, because the constitution doesn't change. If you were to then answer that same set of questions, based on how you've been in the past, say 3 to 6 months, that will give you your current state of health. We call that vikriti. So constitution, prakriti, and current state of health, vikriti. And so the difference between those two things will tell you which of the doshas is out of balance.
Okay, that makes sense. And then that leads to the treatment plan that would include the things. So you've got, so I guess if you bring it together, you've got the fundamentals that everybody should do every day, like scraping your tongue, oiling your body, because that doesn't matter what your constitution is. But then discovering what your natural constitution is, like who am I as a person, and then where am I right now, and then you've got the bridge, and you can work out what you can do to close that gap and get back to your natural state. What do people struggle with, like when they come to see you, and you do a treatment and you give them a course of things to do? What do people struggle with in terms of integrating? Is it too many things, or where does it, because it all makes so much sense when I listen to you speak. It's like, it makes so much sense, and I do these things and I think, well, why doesn't everyone do these things? But where does it fall apart? You've seen lots and lots of people over the years now. I'm really interested in your view as to what the problem is, and then we can talk about what could we do to support people as they go on their journeys of change and transformation towards better health.
I think there's a couple of things that can be challenging. So if we just think food, for example, we're very emotionally attached to the way that we eat, and until somebody starts to ask you to make certain tweaks to that, you don't realize how emotionally connected you are to the food choices that you're making, And so that can be one thing. And it's also very habitual. The way that we eat tends to be habits. And so breaking habits or changing habits can be really, they can be challenging in and of themselves. I think, so food can be a difficult thing for people, but, it's a journey. And this is what I remind my clients. This is a journey. You don't have to make wholesale change overnight. We start by making little tweaks. We see how how you can integrate those into your life. And then you can just build on that more and more. The more you understand it, the more it starts to make sense, the easier it is to then be making those choices on an ongoing way. So I think, food is definitely an area that is can be challenging for people. I think the other thing, is time. Just finding the time to fit some things in, like oiling your body, for example. It takes, or doing nose drops in the morning. Those things, it's not a lot of time, but it is time, and so I think just kind of, restructuring things a little bit. So if you need to wake up, I don't know, 20 minutes earlier than you normally do in order to give yourself time to do those things, or to make sure that you've got time to sit down and eat your breakfast rather than, having it on the go or skipping breakfast. So, those sorts of things. So there's a bit of restructuring that's required. Doesn't have to be dramatic, and it can start in with small things, because little things don't often add up. Whereas, those big kind of changes, and you go on a crash diet and change all these things, it's unsustainable. And so that's why ultimately, even though you might get short-term results, you don't get, long-term benefit, because they're unsustainable.
Yes. And that's another thing. I mean, all of these things are great things. I was talking to someone the other day, and he said, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to be healthy. And my response to that was, it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to be unhealthy, because when you actually balance, and this is I think the key point in terms of the return, because you might be getting up 20 minutes earlier to oil your body and oil your nose and scrape your tongue, and these are tiny things, but if they give you hours back in the day where you're feeling more energetic and you're just feeling better in your body, then it's worth doing that. And they're not really painful things to do. It's not like these things have dreadful side effects. It's all very pleasurable, and it's really enjoyable. And you can start doing tiny things and then start to build on it, so it creates a whole a whole lifestyle plan over a period of time. And I guess what you're saying is, if you just keep going in the same direction and you don't stop, because I think one of the issues we have here in the West is that there is a view that there's a right or wrong way to be well. We had a wellbeing at work conference summit, virtual summit the other day, and one of the guys was talking, and he was saying a lot of people ask him what's new in wellness, and he says nothing's new. It's exactly the same. It's around food, sleep, movement, like the same tools. But I feel in the West, and maybe I'm a little bit guilty of this as well, is we suffer from that new and shiny. It's like, what's the new thing? What's the new gadget? What's the new diet? What's the new craze, so that we can actually get involved in it? And we've almost got to ignore all of that stuff. And the question is, what's right for me? Where am I out of balance? Where am I out of equilibrium? And what can I do to be able to get back into that state of equilibrium?
I agree. I think that's where knowing your constitution is so helpful, because if you know your constitution, then you can see that, of all the fads and the fashions that come and go in health, you can understand which ones are actually potentially beneficial for you and which ones aren't. Intermittent fasting, very popular at the moment, great for kapha constitution, not so good for, some of the others. So, I think once you understand that, it's really helpful to be able to see, where things, fermented foods, again, not great for pitta, not so bad for kapha. So, once you understand what the constitution is, you can work out, is this actually going to be helpful? Otherwise, it's hit and miss. You're just trying everything and waiting to see what happens, and maybe it makes you put on weight, or maybe it makes you feel terrible. And you don't know, and you don't know why either.
No, and that's highly stressful. Yeah, I think when you're out of balance and you don't know why, and you're trying all these different things, then that's like a super stressful scenario. So I like that. If it's like intermittent fasting is big. A lot of people talk about how healthy it is, but it's healthy for some, but not for others. So you shouldn't try. Same with ice baths. I guess it's another big trend, going into the ocean and freezing. That's a big trend, but there are going to be some constitutions, I'm guessing, like the Vata constitution, that may not. Is that right? Is the Vata constitution may not necessarily like the cold?
Yeah, because, and with Vata constitution, they generally don't have a lot of adipose tissue on the body, so fat tissue on the body, which is why they feel the cold, so much. And so maintaining kind of warmth is really important for Vata constitution, because the colder they get, particularly if it's, cold winds, it increases the air and space elements in their body, and it makes them, less grounded, more frantic. The cold bath thing is an interesting one. It does have the effect of tonifying all the organs, and so there can be real value in that. But again, it's just who and how often, and these sorts of things. It's not that a Vata constitution could never do that. It's just that if it became part of their daily routine, it started throwing them off balance. Maybe that's not the right thing for them to do.
Interesting. We're almost out of time, but just to wrap up, I'm interested to talk to you just about, because it's very holistic, and we've talked a lot about the things that we can do, the habits, the routines that we can actually integrate into our life. But there's also that, dare I say, more spiritual side of Ayurveda, or looking for purpose, looking for more meaning in your life. And I'd love you to expand on that, and how Ayurveda, because it links into the yoga side of things as well, in terms of how Ayurveda helps people to find a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning in their lives.
So it does. It does touch on all of these things. I mean, having good health is at the root of everything, right? And that, and anybody that's either struggled with their own health, or been present for somebody else that has, you realize that without health, everything else starts to fall apart. And so making sure that you're in a healthy state, actually, by mind and body, gives you the platform to be able to start to think more deeply and more spiritually, if you like, in terms of why am I here and what is the purpose, and those sorts of things. I think yoga can be a really wonderful tool for that, because for many of us it's it acts as a moving meditation, and so it allows us to witness ourselves in ways that we otherwise might not be able to. The mat becomes a mirror over time, and so you start to realize that the way that you're approaching your entire practice or a particular posture is increasingly reflective of the way that you approach the rest of your life, you know. So you've got all your people that are like pushing into all the postures and going as hard as they can, and that's generally how they're probably approaching their lives. And you've got other people that aren't pushing themselves and they're not really trying because they can't really be bothered, or they don't, you know, they don't like the feeling of discomfort, and so that's generally, you know, how they're living their lives. And so I think, you know, on top of the numerous benefits that come from yoga, you know, through breath and through, you know, self-development and consciousness and meditation and these sorts of things, you know, that alone is incredible. But one of the other Vedic sciences that I'm really passionate about is astrology, as you know. And I think, you know, from my perspective, that is one of the, you know, the most insightful ways to get a handle and understanding on your, you know, your incarnation, what you're here to be doing, and where your talents are, and, you know, where the challenges are. And the reason that I think it can be so helpful is because it creates an objective view of what is otherwise a purely subjective experience of life. And so all of a sudden you can see yourself almost as a third person, in order to understand yourself in different ways. And that kind of distance from your own neuroses and your own personality is, you know, I mean, is just incredibly healing in and of itself. Creates a huge amount of acceptance as well as direction. Yeah.
And just on astrology, and it's an area that a passion that I share as well, but it ties in very much with that self-knowledge, self-awareness, and that piece. What to find out, because in the West, astrology is often thought of as something which is more, you know, more entertainment, if you like, rather than something which is as fundamental as you describe. For someone who wants to understand themselves better and have their birth chart read, how would they go about doing that? What would you suggest? Because I know you read charts like this. You read them remotely now.
It is increasingly, or, you know, these days often just entertainment. But just on that, there was a time when only pharaohs and kings and queens were deemed worthy of the divine science of astrology to have their charts read. It would never have been made available to mainstream people. And so we happen to be living in a time where it's readily accessible, and I think, you know, that should be celebrated. But it also requires discernment, right? You need to obviously be finding people that are using that in a ethical way. But the way to get your chart done, you need to know your time of birth is the key. So most people know the date and the place that they were born. The time of birth is the key, and the more accurate the time, the more accurate the chart. So ideally, you get someone that comes in with my birth time is 3:34 a.m. or, you know, something like this is solid gold when you hear this. But I do say to people that, you know, it's if it's not on your birth certificate, and some hospitals in some years did record it, the same hospitals in other years didn't. Different parts of the world may record it or not, but check in other places. Check like a baby spoon or your baby bracelet, or you know, other ways, you know, announcements in the newspaper, these sorts of things, because people can find their birth times in different ways. And if none of those things exist, and your mum says, I think it was, you know, this time, then see if you can triangulate that with other people. So see if you can ask your dad or your auntie or somebody else that might have been there at the time. He says, oh yeah, I remember I finished work and came straight to the hospital, so it must have been around. You just want to,
you've got to be like an investigator, really, to really try and figure it out.
And it's worth it. It's worth it. And if you can't, if there's absolutely no way to get it, you can rectify the chart. There are people that specialize in doing that, which is to work backwards from significant moments in your life in order to rectify the birth chart. And so that's a possibility as well, but it's detailed and specialist area.
That's super interesting. In terms of doing it that way. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. So let's kind of wrap up now. So in terms of, we talked a lot about balance and equilibrium, but if you were to summarize and maybe pull together kind of 5 things people can do, given that everybody listening here is going to be at their own starting point. So everyone's got a different context and is facing their own personal struggles. But what would you recommend to start on this journey towards wellness and better health? And we've talked about all the benefits of doing that, and it is something that we can control. Like all the things that you've talked about are things that we personally can control. There's so much at this time which is uncertain and feels very out of our control. but what we can control are the things we put in our body, on our body, around our immediate environment. And the Ayurvedic approach, and the yoga approach, and the astrology that you shared are three systems that have been around for a long time that can really help us in the present time. What would you suggest as the kind of 5 best first steps to take?
Gosh. Okay. So I think one thing is, a fairly easy thing that most people could start to think about is just to have a look around your kitchen. Think about cleaning up your kitchen. I don't mean in terms of doing the dishes. I mean, just having a look at the food that's in your fridge and the food that's in your cupboards, and just opting for more fresh, less packaged food. So the more that it feels like it's alive when you eat it, the more prana exists within that food. So you get much more nourishment from that. So I think that's one easy thing. Just take a look around and start to clean it up. See if you can rely less on processed and packaged and more on fresh and alive. So I think that's one thing people can do. Tongue scraping, you've already spoken about. For me, that is a daily routine that I never skip and never will skip. And I think once you've gotten into that habit, anybody else will find themselves never skipping that one either.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's an easy one.
It's a simple one.
I think regulating your meal times is also a really important one. So just trying to be consistent where you can on the times that you eat. So because your body comes to expect food. And so if it's expecting food at 12 o'clock or between 12 and 1 every day, it's going to start secreting digestive enzymes that actually improve digestion. That gives you better energy levels, better absorption, all that sort of thing. So I think just regulating those times. In Ayurveda, we talk about the quantity of food taken at each meal, and we say that you should have breakfast like a prince or a princess, lunch like a king or queen, and dinner like a pauper. So it's mainly to do with how much you're eating. Lunch should be the biggest meal of the day because you've got hours to burn it off. Digestion's naturally at its peak, so it's an easy win just to have a big lunch and a smaller dinner. That creates a huge health benefits in and of itself. I think being mindful of the media that you consume. I think obviously anybody that's listening to this is probably already thinking in those terms. But you can think about the things that we read or that we consume as food for our minds. We're talking about food for our body, but there's food for our mind. And so the things that you're watching, the way that makes you feel, is having a massive impact on the cells of the body, because it impacts the dialogue that we have with ourselves. And so I would say that's another area just to think about. If there are things, people that you're following on Instagram or whatever that make you feel bad about yourself, just unfollow, just unsubscribe to it, because we're actually in a unique time where we're curating our own realities, and it's so easy to forget that the version of that reality that you're consuming is one that you yourself have created, and you think that everybody's like that because that's everything you're seeing, but in fact that might be a drop in the ocean. And so just making sure that you're creating a balanced content stream in your life, in your world, I think is also really important. The people you're around, the conversations that you have, we become those things. And so surround yourself with people that you find inspiring, or that allow you to be authentic. And that's got to be the most important thing. I posted something the other day that was saying never trade authenticity for acceptance. And I think, absolutely, again, that's where astrology can be helpful. Helps you understand yourself. Once you understand and accept yourself for who and how you are, it gives other people permission, to do the same. And that has a pretty important ripple effect. So those things are important. Regulating your sleeping and waking times, that's also really important. Just like when you eat at a consistent time, your body comes to expect that. If you, sleep and wake at the same times, that's really helpful as well. I mean, an 80-20 rule with that is fine. But in order to do it, I get people to set the wake up time. Okay. Because you can't make yourself sleep, but you can make yourself get up. So if you get up every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, by day 5, you'll be in bed by 10 o'clock at night. And once that happens, you're in the right circadian rhythms and everything starts working better.
Perfect. Cool. I think that's 5. Well, thank you so much, Benjamin, for spending some time with us today. Let me acknowledge you for all the great work you're doing. I mean, it's really incredible in terms of the business that you're running and the community that you've built. Where can people find out more about yourself and the Medicine Man and the work that you're doing?
Sure. So people can go to themedicineman.com.au online. We'll be having a new website up shortly, or in due course, that's e-commerce enabled and things, so that if people are looking to purchase particular products, they'll be available, tongue scrapers, that sort of thing, just to make it more accessible and available to people. If you're in the Sydney area, in sort of King's Cross, come and see us. We're on Bayswater Road, our clinic down the road in Surrey Street. So either of those locations, come by, have some chai.
Yeah, that's amazing chai. And you do Zoom readings, so astrology chart readings via Zoom, and do you do consultations via Zoom as well for people who
consultations via Zoom as well? Yeah.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for spending time, and thank you everyone for listening. See you next time.
Thank you.